It is hard to change components on the fly. What if we have to do it for software components in production systems without bringing them down? Let us check it out. Hi all, welcome to another episode of Saturday Architecture. We have Nishant, Venkat and Deepak with us. And what I thought we would discuss now is, let me start by a simple joke. So there's a heart surgeon who takes his car to the mechanic for repair. And then the mechanic asks the heart surgeon, "Sir, what do you do?" He says, "I'm a heart surgeon." He says, "Oh, okay. So what do you do exactly?" He says, "No, I work in the heart. It's like the engine of the human body. I work on that, make sure that it works." He says, "Oh, just like what I do. I work in the heart of the car. You work in the heart of the human body. Both of us pretty much do the same thing." He says, "Pretty much, but then there's just one small difference. You have to fix the car when the car is running, not when it's stopped. That is the difference between what I do and what you do." Okay. So as architects, how is it that we fix the car while the engine is running? Right? So that's been a serious challenge for me, especially within Tiny Magic, the application that we want to do. We want to come up with the next version of what we are having now. It's a major revamp. The screens, the API, the backend engine. I mean, it's not just an incremental development. It's a completely new thing. And it's been pretty frustrating for me. And with all my years of experience, I've just not been able to move it. It's like 16 months close to, right? And that's very frustrating. And the unfortunate thing is this: I have a version which works well. Now that kind of disincentivizes the pressure to get the new thing out also. So it's kind of counterproductive. I have something great, okay, and I have something good enough, right? So the great is not getting a chance to come out because I've got something good enough, okay, and the business pressure is on.
I'm itching to take the analogy further.
Okay. So this is my frustration, right? And I really don't have an answer for this, right? We try some things. So I thought that's what we would explore here. So any of you similar situations, problems?
So I will take your heart surgeon analogy a little further, right? Because actually that means that is as close to reality as it can be in terms of what you are trying to do, right? You're trying to fix something which is running. So one thing which the heart surgeon did not mention is, how does he actually do it? How does he fix a heart which is actually running? So they have something called as a heart lung machine, which actually performs the function of the heart and lungs while he's operating on the actual thing, which means your blood and oxygen is being pumped through an external thing while the heart surgeon is operating on your actual heart, which is supposed, so it's basically bypassing your heart and fixing your running heart. So it is actually stopping your heart, fixing it while running an external heart and lung machine for you. So think about it in this way: where is your heart lung machine when you're trying to do this?
Okay. So Nishant, Venkat, Deepak, any situations in your thing you have faced something similar to this?
Yeah. Venkat, do you want to go first?
Yeah, please go ahead, Nishant.
Yeah, this is a typical problem that I think in the software industry, especially when we have to upgrade the things with new steps or new functionalities, or doing some fix, which is actually may not be an issue which is occurring very frequently, but still we have a better solution for that, and we are finding a solution to apply the fix without impacting the existing system. So and generally in the airline industry, in the airline software, actually we have a very strong SLA agreement, SLA things with customer, 99.99% availability of the system. So in such a contractual things, this has more relevance, like how we have to apply or upgrade the system or apply fixes while the system is running, and that too without any outage. So in such a context, actually, whenever we have a new functions to be developed or a patch to be applied, this is one of the criteria that we always cross check how we can apply this without having an outage, because that is a contractual agreement, 99.99% yearly system availability. So we have only that percentage of times for the outage to apply something big. Rest all things we have to manage in a different way. So we have actually we are following different things like we all know, like this system rolling updates, like multiple redundant servers will be running and the fixes will be applied in a rolling fashion. Apply the things, fix or apply the release in the upgrade in one of the server, and first we will make it offline and then apply the fix in that server, and then do a sanity internally, and then make that server online and make the next set of servers offline, do in a rolling mode. That is one thing. And another things we used to like whenever we build a functionality, we should have some mechanism to control it dynamically through configurations. And even that configuration, what we used to check is like we can change the value while the system is running and reflect the changes immediately after changing it without having any server restart. That is another thing for switching on and off a functionality or to changing the behavior of a functionality. And another aspect, actually, even though we had such a things, actually we haven't heard much the like real-time instrumentation and changing the behavior in a real-time thing by injecting some codes real-time and change the behavior. Or let's take a case like, assume we have a null pointer exceptions when a particular code is running, and we know that will occur or when some value is getting null from the request or from the inputs given by the customer.
Okay.
So we have to take the things or the real-time instrumentation like even though the value is null, we have to populate with some dummy value in that code, and that have to do with the instrumentation things. So as I said, these are the few aspects that we used to follow to meet the very challenging 99.99% system availability because it is quite normal, like we have this monthly patches or the major R&Ds and all these things has to reach the customer environment, and that without impacting their existing live operations.
Okay, so that's actually interesting tips there on the SLAs and the workarounds for that.
And Kumaran, my point is like, actually here also this is main mindset, like once, even though if we have a customer agreement or not, if we set that as a basic principle to be followed for our software, like our system should be available for this much time in a year. If we set as a general principle as a principle in the software development cycle, and pass on that information to all the engineers working behind that software, then I think automatically, or it is kind of, they are forced to find some kind of mechanism to stick on that with that rule.
Okay, got it. Interesting. Venkat?
Yeah, Kumaran. So whatever problem you are facing, last 16 or 18 months, actually we are about to enter.
How wonderful!
Okay. This Wednesday we are starting our major revamp of our Aqua Connect app. So it was a little like I'm getting little nervous, when it can be like completed. Though we have like something in our mind how it can like take it forward. So
Is it like changing from your Farm Mojo to Aqua Connect?
No, like name change, we have already done it.
Okay.
Now we are doing the major revamp of our app itself. So we found like little the customer adaptability was no much better if we change it to new the current version, because the previous version we haven't done the much of user research at the time of developing the Farm Mojo. Now we when we analyze the usage of the app and uninstall and install ratio, it was not good. So then last couple of months we are doing we have done a lot of customer research. We have done a lot of modification in the app. Now we are going to the major revamp of the app itself. So it is kind of new app.
That's both the mobile and the backend. Both you're revamping, or just the mobile part alone?
Just a mobile.
Just the front end. So the APIs all will remain the same.
So that's what I'm saying. So in the there are some little tweak we need to do in the API itself. So what we are planning to is, instead of right now it is a monolithic server. We this version we wanted to adapt with the like microservices. So this way, like we can in future, if we want to do any like new feature add, or if we want to do some kind of, if you said art surgeries, I guess we don't need to shut down the whole system. So we can just work on the particular part where we are facing the problem, and we can like try to resolve.
So in this case, it becomes even more trickier because you don't have control over the app. Like you said, the mobile application is going to change, right?
Yes.
Which means I assume that pretty much the screen flow, everything from the login to the logout, the entire experience is going to be different. Am I correct?
We are also planning to change the design pattern itself. So it is coming to new app.
Okay. Are you changing the front end technology also, or you're still using Flutter?
No. We are still using Flutter, only the design pattern changes.
Okay. So then in that case, right, you also have another challenge that some end users might be on an older version of the mobile application. Some will be on a new application. That is also an interesting challenge that you might face, right? You have any way to tackle that? Because if it's a web application, I know everybody is going to use a new version. But once it becomes a mobile app, right, somebody might just not choose to upgrade or reinstall the latest version. How are you trying to, what's your plan for that?
We are not going to break the existing APIs or backend. And this will be like, as you said, a completely new app. Whoever using the old app, we know who are using it. We can track it through the mobile number. Either our EO officer will contact them to upgrade the app for quite some time. We are not going to break it in a one day. We will be keeping it for a old version app for like another couple of months, until we'll convince all the farmers to upgrade to new app.
Interesting. So, but in the App Store, it's just one application. It's not like you have two applications.
Yes, it's only one application.
It's only one. Any reason why you decided not to do a forced upgrade?
Sorry?
Forced upgrade.
Forced upgrade, we haven't done that bad that stuff in the app itself.
Oh, okay. Got you. Okay. Venkat, your experiences?
So let me actually, this when I hear these problems, this actually is a very standard problem, and there are standard solutions available. Now I'm just, maybe I don't know, I'm preaching to the choir or whatever. You guys probably know this thing. So this is based on what are the standard solutions available. I'm not going to talk about something which I created or something which is brand new. Some standard solutions already exist, right? So if you look at so what Nishant actually talked about in the DevOps community, they call it feature switches, right? So how do you turn on and off stuff, right? Which is while the system is in flight or system is running. So they call it the terminology is called feature switches. and there is now actually software available for you to manage these feature switches. So technically there is nothing a feature switch. Feature switch is just something which is like bypassing your code, which is basically converting your code into dummy, and just if it will just bypass the code path when you turn it on, turn it off, it go bypass it, and so on and so forth, right? So there are standard services available. One of them I know of is called Launch Darkly. It's if you search on it, it's called Launch Darkly. So they enable you to turn on and off features on the fly. So, but basically what it does, it gives you a control framework. So one is it gives you an SDK or whatever to put these feature switches in your code, and then it gives you an external control that okay, now this is your dashboard. You decide you want to turn this on, turn this off. So it is literally like your configuration settings in your mobile phone. So you can turn it on, turn it off. So that kind of thing is there. So that is one thing which is there for in-flight feature testing. You want to do it, and this is if you think about it, you are using this thing all the time. Whenever Google says, "Do you want to try new interface?" Outlook.com says, "Do you want to try new interface?" What are they doing? They're just turning that switch on for you, and for you that interface comes out because the code path is changed for you, just for you. Right. So what the architecture is enabling for them is that it lets you change specifically by user. They say, okay, this user, this interface, this user, classic interface. How do they change it back? It says, okay, I don't like it. Facebook has been doing this thing for quite some time now. Right? Say, okay, I don't like this interface. Let me go back. So that is feature switch is one standard way of doing testing in flight. So what you do is you write your standard application, put one new thing in it, put it behind the feature switch.
Oh, okay.
Right. So you can turn it on, you can turn it off at will without uninstalling or redeploying your whole application. So that is one way of doing it. Other is
just
what
curious,
they call as,
does this, is it for web applications or does it work with thick clients?
It should work for anything. It should work for anything. As long as, think about it. If your mobile application is going and talking to an API, and API is supposed to behave a certain way.
True.
Right? You turn on or off of basically you're changing. Right. So I know it mainly talks about web applications, but I don't see any reason why the concept cannot be applied to any kind of application. You are just basically bypassing some piece of code.
Okay.
As an architect, I'm talking about in terms of architectural concept.
Right? Got it. Yeah.
Right. So maybe Launch Darkly is only specifically for web applications or whatever, but that concept can be applied by any application.
It's interesting. I think I was just looking at the client libraries. It has stuff for Swift, React Native, Xamarin, JavaScript, Node.js client. I think it's pretty much
comprehensive.
The server Flutter also is there. So I think server side, of course, yes, that's a kind of given. But I think on the client side also they have support with React and React Native stuff. Yeah. Interesting.
So this is one which is feature switch. Right?
Okay.
So the other method is how you change whole server level, means you built a whole new application, one monolithic and one microservices, right? So basically you have two versions of the same thing, right? So what most cloud services do is they let you configure a sort of a, let's say a gateway in front of it, right? There are various names. That means, I don't know Azure what it calls it. Is an application gateway, or basically it's a front end. It's a front end which takes in the requests, right? Which takes in the requests and sends it to the specific backend.
It's like a proxy. It's like a proxy.
Like a proxy, but I forgot the name.
In AWS, it is API gateway.
API gateway. So API gateway. See, API gateways are much more actually comprehensive. I'm just talking about much more simpler things. API gateway actually have authentication and all those things. You don't need that for simple. Suppose, let's say you want to test this thing only for 10% of your users, right? All you need is that traffic should get split. 10% of the traffic should go to the new application, 90% should go to the old application, right? Where you're doing
Okay.
this A/B testing, right?
Mm.
So this gateway in front basically splits the traffic, right? And it sends it in both directions, right? And the other way is you have this in Azure they call it deployment slots, right? So whenever you deploy an application, if it is a web application, PaaS or whatever, PaaS, mostly PaaS, if you use a web app kind of a deployment, so they give you deployment slots. So it is everything remains same. So you say, okay, I want to deploy to this slot. So you will get two slots. One is production, and other is staging, let's say, right?
Okay.
So you deploy to staging, right? And you swap the slots. It says, okay, now staging becomes production, production becomes staging. If it works, you test it for some time, and if it does not, it says, okay, swap back, right? That is how you reduce the risk of exposure, right? So these are the standard methods which are available sort of out of the box in most cloud
That's a beautiful tip,
application
Deepak.
platforms.
Yeah.
So this deployment slot, right? Is that a Azure thingy or?
It's basically an Azure thing, but
Okay.
I believe similar kind of options are available across cloud platforms.
Okay.
They may call it by a different name, but the concept is the same.
Okay.
So if you just put a deployment slot equivalent in AWS, you'll probably find it.
Very nice. Okay. So, so basically, these are, I think, one is, I think Nishant kind of stopped about the technology rolling upgrades. You're kind of knowing that you need to run it and then you need to change it on the fly. And I think Venkat's is and Deepak's is more like from a functional aspect also, correct? I think for just if I just go back, right, I'm just thinking how I could do it. I'm still struggling because even at the core level, right, it's if I can the only similarity between both the applications is some parts of the functionality at the end user level looks same, but if I just go one level deeper beyond the user data, there's nothing else which is reusable. So it's like even the fundamental login homepage API that is needed, right, that itself is changed. So I think it's kind of stuck when you have something which is such a core change, right, where you're literally changing the fundamental core itself. It's not something like I still have to think more.
So see, this is a classic problem which Microsoft has, which is backward compatibility, right? So what you are looking for is backward compatibility, that somebody who is used to the previous stuff or somebody who's using the older application, they should not get thrown out, right? What is
see, there's two aspects to backward functionality, backward compatibility. Okay, one is I would say actually three attributes of backward compatibility. Okay, the first and the most obvious is technology compatibility. Okay, which
Right.
is the API same, things like that. Okay, the second is the user experience. Okay, what am I clicking? How is it? Is it going to be same? Is it going to be different? The third one is actually the toughest part. It is the expectation or the behavior mindset, right? If I have to, just because I'm coming up with a new version, I expect the end users to change their mindset itself, right? And they have to think differently to use the application. That is the so there are three aspects to backward compatibility. I'm struggling on all the three because I'm trying to change all the three at the same time, which is probably a problem.
I think maybe I will try to this is my what I think. I try to simplify stuff in my head. I try to reduce complexity. That is my sort of usual approach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use whiteboard and try to draw what I think is the solution, right? So you don't have to think about whether it is real or not, Okay.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay. So let's say these are your users, right? So
Okay.
I'm just going to take some. So these are your old users, right? And this is your new users. Okay. Now this is your old application, right? I'm just trying to make it a very
Sure.
crude, right?
Okay.
So I'm not
Yeah.
I'm
Go
not
ahead.
going into the complexity of what might be there inside this application. I'm just going to say black boxes for me, right? And this is my new application.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what the problem you have is, how do you let's say they have a common backend, which is your database, right? I'm just saying this is your user data where stuff is, right? I'm assuming that there is that is the common part. Is that what you said?
No, actually, I have two DBs itself will become two different DBs.
That's fine. So let's say there are two DBs, right? So let's say this new one has its own DB.
Right. Correct.
Right. So, but there has to be some sort of either copy or, because if some people go to the older database, some people go to the newer database, you have a problem, right? So that is the problem you have, right? Now,
Yes, some kind of database syncing here.
yeah, there has to be some kind of a database syncing there. But so means you have two options. One is, anybody who's using the old one says force upgrade, don't matter. If the moment you hit the old one, it just say, okay, send the message back, you cannot log in anymore unless you upgrade. That is the simplest and the most rude way of doing it.
Correct.
Right? It says, okay, I don't care if you have this, and this is actually not a very bad way. You can force upgrade it. At least people know, right? And the people who you work with, you know how they work with changes, so you can decide when to do it.
In fact, like, I would go ahead and say, other than Microsoft, right, and probably old Java stack, none of the new age things are really that considerate for backward compatibility. They just do 2 versions. After that, they say you're on your own.
Yeah. So that's what. So you have to decide what approach you want to take, and how big is your user base, how rude you want to be. So you can just say, okay, we are just drawing the line in sand. Old ones will give you some time. We'll have both these things running. We'll do some synchronization for some time. Otherwise, you have to go back. Or you can have some front end in front of it, which you will see where is the request coming from, and it will send it to the appropriate direction, right? And if this is coming here, it will send it here, right? So this requires much more effort, much more consideration, right? So this is the stuff which you have to build, right? Or you can use the standard stuff which says, okay, you check version number at entry level, the API gateway, which Nishant was suggesting. The API gateway can actually check what version of application you're coming from, and it will send the request to the relevant application. Right. So this is so, and this sort of thing also is very common with what they call as the strangler pattern. Right. So if you're looking for going from a monolith to a microservices kind of a environment, there is a pattern called the strangler pattern. So this is the strangler pattern. They call it the facade.
Okay. And I think one thing which also you suggested sometime back in this discussion is that launch darkly is kind of a technical implementation of the black box that you have drawn.
Yes. Not really. Actually, that the launch darkly actually does not work that way. So let me give you another example of how launch darkly would work. So for launch darkly, there is only one application.
Okay.
So there is only one application, which is the new application, right? In the new application, there is there is the old part and there is the new part. Right? So what Launch Darkly does is, if somebody comes in, it will take them through old and new everything. You can decide whether this is on or this is off. The new part is inside your, so there is only one application which you have deployed.
Okay.
Right?
I mean,
so Launch Darkly is
100,000 feet level, the concept is same, but then once you get lower, it's fundamentally different. It's just one application. Got it? Okay.
Yes. So it's just one application. You can turn on and off the features, the new features which you want to do it.
I think the toughest, the other tough thing also is budget, money, and effort. Right?
Exactly, because all these things are going to cost.
Correct.
If you want to run two applications parallelly,
if the feature is X,
yes.
I think this is what is becoming, for me, it's practically been unpredictable, right? Like I'm not able to estimate the additional cost. So for some time I was holding back new features, but after 4 months I was just holding back new features. That's all. Okay, because the new one was taking more time. And then I said, okay, to the old one, I will start doing it. I still haven't. So basically, the feature which is in your old path, right? Like let's say a new functionality comes, I'm adding it to the new app. Now I have to redevelop it on the newer one also.
No, actually, you don't need to. You don't need to do that. Why do you need to redevelop it?
Okay, so maybe the use case is something like, let's say a user does something and I'm going to allocate points. Okay, the old one went to a different set of tables. The done definition in the old system is very different from the done definition in the new system. And here it is, instead of points, you have something like scores, which later gets converted to points. So at that level, it changes. So I have to redevelop that same thing here. So I think that's what I was. It's like, other than the user data, right? Everything else is changed in the backend also.
So in that case, you see, you have to have the two systems running in parallel. There is no other option. There is no other option for you to.
I think
do that thing.
It took me.
Or you give a time period and says, okay.
It's almost like this running a monolithic and microservice in parallel. Because you're changing the entire stuff, and only the data is saved by.
No, actually, at least there you have face saver. The microservices will kind of feed into or feed from the monolith, right? Like a facade kind of thing. In this case, there is another. Okay, so it's kind of weird. I'm moving from, for lack of thing, I'll say it's like I have one monolith, but that's not useful anymore. I have to go and build
understood.
another one completely. Like let's take and I think it took me a lot of time, probably, right? I think if just as I'm discussing, right, I think I realize now I should have accepted from day one itself that there is no way I can do a
smooth
cutover. I have to run both in parallel. If I had come to that conclusion, right? So when I kind of look at it, so okay, now this thing is giving me that. If around, let's say, 12 months back, I had told myself that, or 14 months ago, that there is no way I can easily cut over from here. Old will continue to run, new will continue to run. I think I would have handled it much better. Okay, so I think somehow that was a blind spot for me.
I mean, I think that should be the first point to think about. Maybe that is where everything should start, because unless you have what I will call this a rollout strategy, right? So you think about it backwards. So this is a technique.
Actually, it was very obvious. Now, if I kind of have a structure to it, right? I would say we talked about the three things, right? Backward compatibility, functional compatibility, and mindset. Okay. Now, if we find that the new one and the backward, old one, right, have, if you do a Venn diagram of newer world and old world, and I put one on top of another, and if that percentage, right, what laps between the old, what can be same between the old world and the new world, if it is anything overlap is lesser than, I would actually say 50%. Okay, consider you're going to run both separately and architect for that in terms of rolling out or stuff like that.
I think instead of just doing the Venn diagram, if you just went with what is the user experience you want your users to have, that would have given you the answer.
Yeah, I mean, in that okay, so I guess I was not clear. When I meant that Venn diagram, it includes data,
The user experience.
user flow,
Yeah, all aspects. Yeah.
everything together, right? The system as a whole, the new world and the old world, right? So if it is more than 50%,
I'm trying to solve the sequence of the problem solving. So I'm saying,
okay.
I'm saying you start with what is the user experience I want to have for this transition, right? That will start giving you the answers. So you start working from the outside in instead of inside out. So instead of thinking what new feature and then how the end user says, start with how you want the end users to feel.
I think I
about
made
this
the classical anti-pattern or anti-fractal, as we call in Hypoha, right? The anti-fractal was looking at it from a technology perspective. It's just, again, one of those things, right? Bad habits, man. 20-25 years of a habit, right? It's not that easy fighting it. I think it's basically looking at it from a technology and implementation perspective. Whereas the tougher challenge was around, the irony is this: I am the end user. In this case, I am the business user also.
Right.
It's not that it's a separate team, but still that blind spot got created.
Because you have to switch off some part of your technology brain and become a user.
Correct. So I was more thinking like a CTO, whereas the mentoring, the chief mentor role, right? I think that guy didn't, that's influence was very less on this. So it was just, and also I think the cognitive cost of trying to run two things in parallel is so high that the mind just shuts off. It's a mindset. I think Nishant or one of you were telling just now, right? Mindset thing. The mindset that you will have to run both, especially for a technical guy, the cognitive cost is so high that the brain shuts off. It's like, I get reminded, we go back to neuroscience, right? When an accident happens, people black out. Because basically the brain doesn't want to record the painful experiences because it doesn't help you in life. So similarly here, when this happened, there's a technical blackout that happens to technologists. I think probably that's something that we need to be aware of. Let's call it technology blackouts to avoid PTSD. Have any of you faced technology blackouts? I'm just curious.
I think this happens all the times, I guess. It's just that we don't realize because we don't self-analyze that this is happening actually.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's why it is difficult to even point out when it actually happened. Because what you remember is solving the problem. You don't remember how you got there.
Correct. Okay. Or what all you ignored, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Great discussion. Great discussion. Thanks all for joining. I think it was pretty much fun. And at least to me, I realized there is another thing called technology blackout, just like physical pain blackout, which happens. It was great. Talk to you all in another fortnight from now. Thanks again. Good to see you, Venkat and Nishant again.